Hello. Welcome to Midwife Monday. It's nice to be back here after a 1-week break and hoping a lot of you are here today after a break. You never know. You never know if breaks confuse large groups of people, just because this was happening religiously every Monday, except for last Monday. So we had a really nice little vacation. I wouldn't call it a big vacation. It wasn't very long, but truly it felt a lot longer than it was because we were just so removed and disconnected from all things technology and phones and computers and all of that, TVs, apps, all of it. It was so great and really reminded me how important that is, right? And how just in normal life, it's hard to get that. It's hard to completely disconnect for all of the reasons. You know, there's usually a reason that I have my phone on, even if it's not birth related, it's kid related usually. So it was so nice to have no service. Like it wasn't even a matter of me turning my phone off. It was just no service for anyone. So what did we do? Well, we went to Lake Powell, which is a very large lake in northern Arizona, so even more north than here. And Utah and Arizona share this lake. So I had never been there. None of us had ever been there, although I realized I had kind of been through there before, probably on the way to Las Vegas. So I had seen it. You kind of can't miss a giant body of water in the desert, but we had never spent any time on it. So we got a houseboat with some friends, and we had 21 people on our houseboat. So 15 of those were children, and of course 10 of those were mine. And they had so much fun, you know, just nothing to report really. Like we didn't go anywhere outside of there. They just were on the land. They dug a lot, especially the little kids were really into digging in the sand, you know, finding seashells and making sandcastles, that kind of stuff. The older kids had fun doing some water sport stuff. So they did like paddleboarding. In fact, I did quite a bit of paddleboarding myself. It was super fun. And the lake is pretty calm, as you might imagine, other than boats kind of sailing through occasionally. And let's see, what else did they do? We also rented a smaller boat, a speedboat. So, you know, they did fun things on the back of that and just enjoyed being out. And the canyon itself, like, feels like another planet. So if you've ever seen the red rocks here, you know, they're huge, huge, amazing rock formations. And this was similar, but also really different. Not as red for one thing, and just as massive, but a completely different energy. And I don't really know why. I mean, still felt really ancient and just amazing, really. The silence out there was something I hadn't heard in a long time. So true silence is really hard to find. I try here out on the trails, but after being in Lake Powell, I realized like how noisy it still is here. Even when you're all alone, totally secluded in the middle of the forest, it's still not that like deafening silence. And I realized today, obviously, like there are airplanes and, you know, you can hear town, even if it's far away, you can kind of hear that like low level buzz of traffic or whatever. And out on Lake Powell, I went out one morning by myself, just kind of into the mountains to try to find some solitude, which that's not an easy thing with that many people around. But yeah, the silence was amazing. There weren't even really any birds, like hardly. So it was really nourishing, and definitely leaves you coming away feeling like, how can I get more of that? How can we all get more of that? When 3 or 4 days sounds like a short time, it felt long. Like every day felt full and long. It wasn't the kind of thing where you were like, oh, where did the whole day go? Like, I know where the day went. I was sitting right there. I was sitting on that beach, holding my baby a lot and trying to get him to sleep and paddleboarding and just sitting with the kids as they played, or, rarely sitting inside making food. Plenty of time to soak it up. So super grateful for that opportunity. It came at a very good time, just a time when some downtime was needed, especially, just like getting ready to move and all of that. In my brain, I was like, we do not have time to go sit on a beach for 4 days. But of course we did. And the trip was already planned. So we had to go, and we had a great time. Yeah, Arizona is amazing. I will miss this beautiful state. It's such a unique place, again, with these canyons and desert. It's such a unique landscape, and it's not at all how I grew up. I grew up on the East Coast, so I grew up around water, but it was an ocean. I grew up around green and humid and all of that. And I've lived here now for so long. This really has felt like home for the last, whatever, 12, 13 years. But yeah, it'll be nice to change geography again and, leave these red rocks behind. I will definitely miss them. But, there's a wisdom and all of that in so many ways that nature presents itself. So it's been a blessing to have this opportunity here for so long with the cactus and things that are sort of rare in other places, right? Like, I think the Southwest is unique in that way. Just this morning, I saw so many beautiful prickly pear flowers out. So the prickly pear cactus, they sprout flowers in the spring, and they are the most beautiful colors. My favorite are the orange ones, but the ones I saw this morning were like the hot pink ones. And they always just get your attention because the desert is so green and brown, and then these beautiful flowers spring up, and yeah, there's so much beauty. So thanks for listening to the vacation summary. I was going to pick a card. Yeah, I wonder if I'll miss it. Like I said, it's not my home in like the truest sense of home, but it has been. I know my kids will miss it. They really don't know anything else. And we've rarely visited other things, We've gone a little farther west to California. I don't know that most of them have ever been way east. So they will miss it, I'm sure. This is their home. And what a cool place to grow up, looking at these big red rocks every day. And one thing I said a long time ago, and I really have, I think, done a pretty good job, is not taking it for granted. I remember when we first moved here, we actually lived closer to we lived in Flagstaff, which is an hour from here, and totally different. No red rocks, they get lots of snow. And so every time I drove down the hill to Sedona, where of course we ended up living ultimately, I was so amazed and just like humbled. And, it's fantastic, especially when you drive into Sedona. Even if you've seen it before, you drive in and it's like a movie set. You feel like, how could that be real? It looks like a green screen. So I'm just reflecting on that, how every time, even lately, if I come back down that hill and I come into Sedona, I just feel so grateful, and I really do appreciate the beauty. So that won't change. The land here is super special. It's sacred. I think it will always remain in my heart as a sacred place. The town itself, that kind of thing, not feeling as sacred to me. Not going to miss it. Not going to miss a lot of that, but the land I will definitely miss. But nature is so amazing. Wherever we go, we can find those spots. And it's really just a reminder of ourselves, So I'm looking forward to finding that new spot in those new places and all the different kind of gifts that that place will bring, because I really do feel at home in nature in general. And so to be able to do more of it will be awesome. All right, so I'm going to pick a card for us here. Welcome, welcome. If you're just joining us, it's always nice to read the comments and just see who's here, just because I'm getting to know a lot of you that I didn't know. You do have to be logged in to leave a comment, which is what I realized. So there's usually people that are here but not able to comment. Just do your best. It's nice to know that you're here. And before I pull a card, if you have any topics that are coming up for you, I would love some ideas. I have lots of things going through my brain, especially after a break, but I don't know how well they're going to come out in an organized fashion. So post your thoughts, ideas, questions, topics. All right, enough shuffling here. Cool. So we have the Star. Let's see what the little booklet says about this. I could make something up, but okay. So a blessing from the universe, energy flowing from the sky to the land, bringing inspiration and hope and a sense of renewal. Oh, that feels right. It's pretty beautiful. I mean, isn't everything a blessing from the universe, really? But in this card, thinking about stuff from the heavens, blessing us here on earth, whether it's the land or the people. What else? There's some water on here. I don't know, kind of reminding me of the lake I was just at, to be honest. Of course, the stars out there were crazy beautiful, so dark. We did make a fire every night, and that was also really special. So I was thinking that, every night when we had a fire, how we really had all of the elements there. And really, should that be so strange to have fire, earth, air, and water all in the same place on the same day, right? It really shouldn't be that strange, but most of us live in a way where it kind of is. I mean, I certainly don't have a fire very often, but it was really nice. And the kids love that, I love how the older kids love that too. They love gathering around the fire and just talking with friends. I mean, they were the ones to stay out there later than Jason and I, for sure. We had babies that needed to go to bed, and I don't know how long the kids were out there just chatting and all of that. I love how that's been a part of their growing up. Yeah, totally. Stars being, right, the divine, lighting the way. Whatever you call it, God, universe, it's there. So that was a nice message today. And this is a beautiful deck. I really should tell everyone what this deck is every time, because you should totally go buy one if you like it and support this artist. This is the front card. So the deck is called Roots and Wings, and Kat Ryall, I think that's how you say it. She's an artist, and she has a beautiful website and lots of beautiful art, and I get a newsletter every now and then. I mean, she's just I think one woman operation, so totally grassroots, no corporations. All of this is her original artwork, and I love this deck. It is really super magical. So Honesty gave that to me. If you're listening, if you're here, thanks again. I've bought several since you gave me the first one that I have at home. That's my special deck. And that deck has just been so helpful with grounding me and reminding me of things on this whole moving adventure, literally giving me advice and tips, which, comes from wherever you want to say it comes from, but I think kind of comes through the cards. And that's been really helpful. So I was just sharing this morning with Olivia. We got to talk a little bit, and I think you're here. That was so fun. Sharing how one of the cards I pulled early on about all of the moving things was not to compromise. And that's been really helpful, just as like a reminder in the back of my head. Don't compromise. Falling stars. I don't think I've ever seen a falling star. The kids did, of course, see who knows what out there in the desert, up in the sky at night. I wish I had been up to see it. I don't know what it was. Maybe a star, but they said it kind of looked like a shooting star, but it just kind of stopped and then went and did something else. So lots of interesting activity out in the skies here anyway, but certainly out in such a open place. I don't know, lots of messages from all kinds of places. Yeah, first trimester bleeding. That's a great topic, actually, Megan. And maybe it's not the most fun in a sense, especially for people that are pregnant in their first trimester. I think bleeding is so disconcerting. That's usually the word I use, when clients contact with that kind of situation going on. It's just disconcerting. Like nobody wants to see blood when they're pregnant. And I think the first suggestion to give if someone does see blood when they're pregnant in the first trimester is just to take a breath, take a breath and understand that there are lots of reasons for it. There are lots of reasons for it. And of course, miscarriage is first on our list. Most of us, that's what we're worried about. But from a purely physical perspective, there's lots of reasons that don't necessarily have to do with miscarriage. Although I guess I'll say, and you all may or may not agree with this, depending on your own experience, just as a woman, maybe as a midwife, I feel like women do know. They do know. And they might not know right away, but usually they know if it's something more serious or not. And I've certainly felt that way. I had way back when, with my third pregnancy, who's my daughter Tallulah, I had spotting the whole first trimester. And I never figured it out. I felt fine. It was never what we call frank bleeding. It wasn't a flow. It was just here and there. It seemed random. And I knew she was fine. I just knew it. I did end up getting a super quick ultrasound just to check if it was if they could see, was it placental? Was it what? Nothing on the ultrasound, nothing at all. So that stopped eventually, and I don't really know. And then, of course, I've totally had miscarriages as well, early miscarriages. And for myself, I knew just based on how I felt before I even saw bleeding, just different circumstances of the pregnancy. It was not fun and it was still shocking. So it's amazing how it can still be shocking. But like I'm saying, kind of at a deeper level, often women have a knowing of okay, yeah, I think this pregnancy has ended. And, that's the way it goes sometimes, of course, as we all know. So reasons for bleeding outside of miscarriage can be cervical, our cervices. That's the plural of cervix. Isn't that fun? Our cervices get, or can get, not everybody, kind of engorged in pregnancy. So the blood flow goes there and can just be more sensitive. So sometimes it's after sex. Sometimes there is no reason. Sometimes it is after someone maybe lifted a whole bunch of weight. Maybe they were moving or something. I've totally had that in my own practice. Sometimes it's placental, and of course you have to be far enough in to have a placenta. But in other words, it's not always a catastrophic thing. And often we don't ever know. So it seems like if it's headed in the direction of miscarriage, obviously that becomes clear at a certain point. And the other reasons, sometimes we never know, like I shared with my own story. And then there are vaginal reasons, of course. Sometimes it's just, maybe it's a yeast infection, sometimes it's not even vaginal. I've had clients who, maybe it was a hemorrhoid. Like sometimes we don't even quite know where blood is coming from. Not that that's as common, but I'm just saying, you see blood, you think the worst, and you really have to probably rule out a couple of things unless you're heavily bleeding and cramping and, miscarriage is obviously happening and pretty inevitable. Yeah, prickly pears, they're so beautiful. I'm trying to think of what else about miscarriage. So I guess if, I'm the midwife, which this is Midwife Monday, so I'll pretend I'm the midwife. If someone texts or calls with bleeding, there are definitely some good questions to ask. So the first would just be, what color is it? How much? And getting a sense of the amount. Because again, bleeding is disconcerting. It can be shocking, and kind of overreacting is a normal response. So once you ask some good questions about bleeding, a lot of the times it's not as bad as kind of you were led to believe. It's just a little bit of spotting. It's not even really considered bleeding. Maybe it's just some like blood tinged mucus, right? So you got to figure out what's going on. And then follow-up questions, did you have sex recently? Anything else to report? Or did you lift a bunch of things, And it's usually a wait and see. So that can be the hardest part. I think somebody said something about ultrasound. Yeah, people jump to ultrasound and labs. And to be honest, I'll raise my own hand. I had been a midwife for a little while, and I had never had a miscarriage until after my 5th baby. And it was weird because I had a dream I was going to have a miscarriage. So I was like prepared for it in some ways, but I really wasn't prepared because I had never experienced it. And it was always something that had freaked me out, to be honest, like even in working with clients, just because I didn't have the experience and death and all of those things. It was sort of before I became more comfortable with a lot of that. So I started bleeding in this pregnancy. I was only like 5 or 6 weeks. And I completely kind of freaked out, to be honest. Like I didn't act patient. I didn't wait to see what was going on. I wish I had just taken a breath and, just kind of let it play out. I just really didn't want to miscarry. Like, I think that's also really normal. Like, I really wanted this baby, whoever it was. And it's like I couldn't accept this. But as I mentioned earlier, the pregnancy just didn't feel quite right, even though it had only been like a week or so that I had been pregnant. I just didn't feel good. And in all my pregnancies, I have felt amazing, at least until like 6 or 7 weeks. So it just was this like in between, like I didn't quite feel pregnant, but I didn't get a period. And, so I started bleeding, and yeah, I kind of flipped out and ended up getting another midwife friend to help me get in to see a doctor who did an ultrasound. And that was so demeaning, honestly, because I was like at that point really bleeding. So it sounds so silly because why did I go? I don't know. So he did an ultrasound, and he didn't even say you're having a miscarriage or anything compassionate. He was just like, well, your dates must be off or something. Like this is only measuring, 4 weeks or something. I was like, no, my dates aren't off, you fool. I'm bleeding and my baby's no longer alive. Like, have some compassion. And then maybe that's what I needed, though. Like, maybe I needed that experience because I remember getting home from it and then the bleeding really picked up. So that's the tricky thing with first trimester bleeding, obviously, is like, if you start with spotting or light bleeding, you just don't know. It's either going to stay that way and nothing's wrong necessarily, or it's going to stop, or it's going to progress into, more of a flow. And depending how far you are, more like a birth than a cycle. But that patience is really hard. So I didn't have it the first miscarriage I had. And then for the second early miscarriage I had, I didn't go that route, obviously. I knew what was coming and just let it happen. So patience is really your friend. There's no reason to jump to testing unless you want to, but time will tell. And I know that's like the hardest place to be. I have helped a lot of women through that space, obviously, like my own clients or people that might be potential clients, right? I always think it's so terrible how sometimes women don't even have a midwife at that point, or, they don't really have anyone, but they're going through this experience. So I'm always happy to help, even if someone was going to come maybe for an interview and then they start bleeding. I always tell them, let me know if you need anything. Text me if you need support, because I know how unprepared I was, and I was already a midwife. So I don't know. It's just something we don't talk about. And everybody, if it is headed in that direction, people will have different ways of dealing with it. If you're far enough along, obviously, like if you're 9 weeks, 10 weeks, 11 weeks, then it makes sense if you have access to someone with a Doppler. To me, it makes sense to listen for a heartbeat, because what is an ultrasound anyway? Same technology. And for me, and the women I've helped, that always seems to make sense. But some women don't want that either. So then you just wait. You just wait and you get more clues, or you don't. And then you can always access testing options. So Doppler, you have to be far enough along to hear a heartbeat. And feeling someone's uterus can be really helpful, especially if they've had babies. Maybe not at 4 weeks or 5 weeks, although I've felt my own uterus at that gestation. But if you're not used to what that feels like, that would be more tricky. So in other words, if you have a uterus to palpate from the outside, then seeing how that feels, and if it matches the dates you have, would make sense. I'll never forget this woman I started working with, and this is so long ago, man. It has to be like 14 years ago. So, we decided to work together, and we planned our first visit, as we often do, right? So that's a very in-depth visit, usually lots of paperwork. It usually takes a long time. And I got to her house, and the first thing she said when I walked in the door was, "Wouldn't it be weird if I wasn't really pregnant?" or something like that. And she kind of laughed and blew it off. But there was this funny energy about it, and it felt serious. And then it kind of made me feel like, I wonder why she said that. And usually I tend to save the clinical part of a prenatal to the end, generally. So that's what we did. And this whole time she's signing all the papers, we're talking about all this stuff. And I'm thinking too, in the back of my mind, I don't know, I wonder why she said that. I wonder if something is going on. So I was there quite a long time. And then the last little piece was the clinical part. And if I remember correctly, she was 12 weeks. So she laid down and she wanted to hear a heartbeat with the Doppler. And I remember putting my hands on her belly, and there was just nothing to feel. There was no uterus to feel at all, which at 12 weeks is pretty uncommon. I mean, there are situations where you wouldn't necessarily feel, but it just had this energy too of being strange. So, and this is a whole other topic, I think, as the midwife, I don't diagnose people. I'm not going to say what's happening. I don't really even know other than what I feel or what I see. So I try to stick to that I try to stick to the facts, you know? So I put my hands on her belly and I was like, I'm not feeling your uterus. Like, what are your dates again? We went over them. I was like, okay, well, there are reasons why maybe we wouldn't feel a uterus today, but you know, my hand's not feeling a 12-week uterus. Just, that's all. So super awkward in a way to get out the Doppler, but she wanted to. I didn't even know necessarily where to listen because, again, there wasn't a uterus to really feel. But I tried, and I'll never forget one of my mentors years ago saying, you know, there's just a sound. There's a sound of a womb without a baby with a beating heart in it. And I experienced that myself with our son, Sable, who was a miscarriage at 14 weeks. Yeah, just like an empty uterus sound. It's a really like sort of somber and sad energy to pick up on. And it feels totally different when there's a baby in there with a heartbeat to me. You know, even if you can't find that baby right away, or even if you don't find that baby that day, like I've had 9 people at 9 weeks where we listen and it's like, we're not finding it. And they don't want to go on listening for, 10 minutes. And those women are like, oh, it's fine. Like, it's fine. We didn't hear it today. I know everything's fine. And it feels fine. But back to my story, it didn't feel fine. And I was just kind of searching around and I knew I wasn't going to find anything, but I wanted to give it, a time for her to kind of like start to make more of her own conclusions. But like I shared, she had kind of started the appointment with this, what if I'm not really pregnant? And, she was pregnant. She was. I believe her. She was. But at a certain point, probably really early, her baby had stopped growing. So, that was it's not one of the most fun midwife experiences. And I didn't really have a chance to develop a relationship with that woman. I only had that one appointment. But at that point, she hadn't been bleeding at all. So it was like, maybe really shocking. And I remember going out of town after that. My sister was having a baby. So I wasn't around for this woman when she did have her miscarriage. So, I guess these are the things women do, right? These are just the spaces we hold. Sometimes they're awkward and sometimes we don't quite know and sometimes we do. But they happen. They happen a lot. I think looking within for peace, if you're having bleeding, is a very smart and wise thing to do. Again, I know when that was me, and I was experienced, like I said, it wasn't my first pregnancy. That was what I needed to do. I needed to connect with the soul that had been there. I needed to connect with my body more and just figure out what was going on and if there was anything to do, because again, sort of the somber, sad truth about miscarriage. And maybe this is like relieving too. I think in a certain way it is relieving. Like there's nothing to do. There's nothing to do. It's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. And I know there are people that are like, oh, there are herbs and maybe, but not if the pregnancy isn't healthy. That's my opinion. If the pregnancy is not healthy for whatever reason, it's not just benign bleeding. It's not just like some cervical stuff. Like there's nothing to do. And I've been there, so I know how hard that is to accept. I remember maybe it was my second miscarriage, kind of having the thought for myself, like, okay, if this bleeding continues, like, I don't know that I want this pregnancy necessarily. Like, I don't want to have a pregnancy where I bleed the whole time, even though, that's pretty rare too, right? So yeah, it's a disconcerting place to be, but time will reveal. And if it doesn't, then you go looking for answers if you want them or need them. And like I said, there certainly are other reasons. People have subchorionic hematomas a lot, right? That's a thing. In fact, the ultrasound guy that comes to my office, who's really cool and I will really miss for the rare occasion that we invite him here, he does routine ultrasound at a obstetrician's office. all of the time. So this guy is very well practiced, and he does them routinely, not just on women that are experiencing bleeding. And he said that routinely he sees them at least 50% of the time. And I don't know, I don't know more than I know about that. That's what he shared. So women that aren't even experiencing outward bleeding show signs of sometimes internal bleeding under the placenta. So it must be more normal than we think. And then, of course, the women that are actually experiencing blood, maybe they're more severe, maybe it's the location of the placenta, and some of those situations can become quite serious. And again, there's not a lot to do. There are subchorionic hematomas that heal, essentially, and go on to be completely normal, uneventful, full-term pregnancies. And then there are those that become so problematic that they result in labor, and that's not good, of course, because bleeding creates a very unhappy uterus if it gets too much. And of course, it's just overall, I'm sure, difficult to be a baby in that situation too. So I have heard those stories, and they're not the most fun, but not super common either. Yeah, and I just had this experience again last week. I mean, I hate to act like, I'm not helping someone through a miscarriage every week or anything, but it happens a lot. It happens a lot between former clients, potential clients, and then just sometimes friends or in the community or, people online. It's like, it's a big job in a sense. Yeah, so I think I said with the bleeding, just asking good questions, but like I said, it's not like the questions always reveal the answer. So you're asking questions just to get more information, and the woman herself will be like, oh, okay, yeah, I did lift a bunch of stuff. I think it's fine. And you can tell with her reaction. I mean, I think even with people you don't know, there are women that are going to be like, oh, it's fine. And if it continues, then I might check into stuff. And then there are women who right away are like, yeah, I don't know. This doesn't seem right. And it still sort of spirals out the same way. So I just keep in touch with those people, even if I've never met them. If they've been spotting, I just check in maybe the next day or whatever. Hey, how are you doing? Because it usually goes one way or another. It's usually stopped or it progresses. And so I helped someone last week that was a former client of mine. And that's exactly what happened. Although she had heard a heartbeat initially. So she heard a heartbeat and then started spotting. So just kept in touch with her. And over the course of 3 or 4 days, the spotting progressed into a real flow. And, she had kind of a mini labor. I think she was about 12 weeks. So not nothing. And because she had seen the baby, I think at 11. So it all happened for her really fast. It doesn't always happen that way. Like I shared with the story from earlier, often there's a delay between the baby dying and the bleeding and the passing of everything. But the earlier you are, there's not always that delay. So she actually was later, but she didn't have a delay for whatever reason. And her body just was wise in the ways that it needed to be and took care of everything. And she sent some photos and we talked about, just what she was able to see and placentas and all of that. And then just checking in, I think after feels nice to me. And maybe, I don't do it long enough necessarily either. Miscarriage is such a different process for everyone. And, how can you really know? Like for some people, they heal in all of the ways more quickly, and then other women don't. And, it's something that takes a lot of work. Most women will go right back into getting a cycle, though, pretty much. That's been my experience. So, if they're trying to get pregnant, that might happen really fast. And as far as all that advice about not getting pregnant right after, I don't really understand that, but everybody needs to make their own choice. And if something hormonal is going on, so if someone keeps having miscarriages chronically, then maybe there is stuff to be figured out or information to be gained, especially like the 8 or 9 week miscarriages. Sometimes those can be due to like hormonal imbalances. So if someone keeps experiencing that, it could be that nothing is wrong with the baby. It's just their body isn't keeping the pregnancy in the ways that would allow the baby to keep growing. So there definitely are follow-up questions if people are interested in that, like the clients you're working with are interested in that. Otherwise, in my opinion, losses happen. They're really normal in a sense. I know someone posted just about like more losses going on, but for the most part, they are normal, and support is just great. And if someone is further along, whatever that means, like end of the first trimester, second trimester, I think it's really great to have support there. And I have offered that to many people in the past. The tricky part sometimes is that they just don't know, of course, when the miscarriage is going to happen, but that they have someone to call and or just someone with them, because blood loss can be a thing. You don't want to lose too much and become unconscious. Even just keeping hydrated, someone to remind you of that is helpful, because remember, you don't have the blood volume expansion that you would later in pregnancy. So there are women that can lose a whole lot. And I remember a woman here years ago who had that happen, and she ended up going into the hospital. And this is sad. I mean, she's fine now, but she wasn't fine. And they just kind of left her like sitting on the table in the ER, just bleeding and bleeding and bleeding. I mean, why would you go to the ER during a miscarriage? Obviously, to get some help, to get medication or to get help like removing whatever is happening in there that is keeping someone bleeding excessively. But she did not receive good care and ended up, I think, getting a blood transfusion. It was very traumatic. So, not to end on that note, but it can be a big deal for some women. And I think more often than not, we also can just do this in the privacy of our own homes, obviously, and listen to our bodies just like we do in birth in general, and have a wise woman for support, even on the phone or, accessible, just in case you have any questions or things become, weird or unmanageable. But yeah, not the most fun topic, but it's so necessary. I think it's so necessary to talk about. So many sessions and podcasts and blogs could be written and spoken by all of us about our own loss experiences. And I think that's ultimately so helpful. It's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not anything to feel guilty about. It's not anything to be embarrassed about. It's nothing really to do with anything that we're doing or not doing, 99.9% of the time. It's just, part of the process of making humans. Sometimes it happens. Jessica, just to answer your question briefly, because somehow I managed to blab myself full into almost an hour here, I would have her take our 13 moons. You don't need to say much more than that. Just send her the link and say, hey, I heard this is a really awesome childbirth class. It's all online and you can pay what you can. So, for $20 minimum, she can access all of that. And I think that's a great introduction to physiological birth, obviously. Even being a teenager, whatever, whoever you are, I think it's great. So indiebirth.org/13 moons and the number 13. That would be my suggestion. Yeah, I think that answers it. And yeah, and if anybody out there needs more support with first trimester bleeding or anything, just message me. Like I said, it's simple and it's not, but sometimes just someone to hold the space for you as you ask yourself the questions or weigh the benefits and risks of this or that. I didn't really talk about blood testing. That's a whole other thing. And, I think there are people that kind of know when they need that, if they fit into that category. for whatever reasons, if they're more at risk for an ectopic pregnancy or, whatever labs could help with. But like I said, in kind of your more average first trimester bleeding situation, I don't know how helpful that is. It might be, I don't know, for some people, but time will tell. Oh, I have one more story. A good friend years ago, and this is also a very long time, she has had two kids. In fact, the first was a cesarean, the second was a VBAC, and I was a student midwife at the time. And she called me to come to her birth, right? As a student, the other midwife was on her way. I stopped to get gas because I had like no gas in my car, which is a very bad idea if you're on call. And I got to her house and her husband was outside and he was like, "The baby's here." So totally had missed it. She had this baby like lightning. And I went into her bathroom and she was sitting in a dry bathtub. It was like the cutest thing ever. It just had happened so fast. So anyway, births are awesome when you miss them too. But so her third pregnancy, she got pregnant, obviously, and I don't remember why she got blood drawn, like her HCG. It wasn't my suggestion. I don't know. I don't know why she did. But anyway, it came back and it was not in range for the weeks that she was pregnant. And even as a student, I remember looking at it thinking like, this is not right. And whoever did the blood work said nothing. Whoever this OB was said nothing. They said nothing to her because, they always figure women are wrong. They always figure, oh, well, she's just off on her dates. And that's one of my pet peeves about miscarriage and how people communicate information like that. I don't know. It's like they're hiding behind that. Like they're afraid to have the conversation. Yes, it's true. Dates can be off. But if a woman comes to you and she's like, I conceived on May 3rd, you don't doubt her. You don't doubt her. So my friend got this blood work back, was not looking good from my perspective, but what is there to say other than, oh, well, if you are sure of your dates, then like, whatever. But again, time will tell. So sure enough, we were on a camping trip, if I remember, and she wanted to see if she could hear the baby's heartbeat. I think she was 12 weeks at that point. And so I brought my Doppler along to the camping trip. And I remember her just like laying on the floor in this tent and I could not find it anywhere. So that was that. And, in my mind, I have those two things now, the weird lab work and now this, but she hadn't experienced any bleeding. And then not far after that, she started bleeding. And it will always stay in my memory because I was pregnant at the time and I was due to have a baby. So I was helping this friend through a miscarriage while I was like about to go into labor. And that really wasn't fun, but I couldn't abandon her. And I figured my baby would wait another day or two, which he did. And if I remember, I think Margot kind of stepped in and was the one actually there for the actual event, which, so helpful. So nice to have midwife sisters around. So on that note, on that Midwife Monday miscarriage story, yeah, 13 moons. I think it's a great recommendation. I don't see why not is how I feel. People spend more than $20 on lots of things. So to spend that minimum for 50 hours of content, and, of course, to be honest, we hope people can donate more because it was a whole lot of work to put that course together, but we are sincerely offering it as a pay what you can too. So there really aren't expectations, but pay what you can, I guess, means different things to different people. All right. Well, thanks for the fun session. Thanks for the topics. You were all so helpful with that today. I didn't know what was going to come out. I never know what's going to come out, but I'll see you here next week. So always get in touch with me if you would. If you do have something, it's really helpful to kind of know going in, but I can wing it too. I'm good at winging it and it usually turns out fine. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great week. I'll see you here next week.